"No one ever asked me to marry," the native woman whispered, "until the lonely cowboy, Elena, had always known the quiet of the prairie." The wide fields stretched endlessly under the bright blue sky, the wind whispering through the tall grass as if telling stories no one else could hear. She loved the open land, the way it felt like it belonged to her alone. Yet there was a loneliness she could not ignore, a hollow space that had been there for as long as she could remember. She had never been asked to marry, never been chosen, and over the years it became a quiet ache in her heart that she carried every day. She lived with her younger siblings in a small, simple house at the edge of town. After their parents had passed when Elena was still a teenager, the responsibility of caring for her family had fallen squarely on her shoulders. She worked hard, waking early every morning to cook, clean, and tend to the small garden behind their home. The garden was modest, filled with vegetables and herbs, but it was a piece of life that she nurtured with care, and it thrived because of her attention. Every morning she would step outside, breathe in the crisp air, and feel a little pride that despite everything, life continued to grow under her hands. She ran errands for neighbors, helped at the small market, and occasionally tended to animals for those who needed assistance. She was polite and quiet, always ready with a kind word. Yet somehow she seemed invisible in a world that celebrated loud laughter and public displays of attention. People would smile at her in passing, but no one had ever looked at her with that spark of affection, that hint of love. She had grown accustomed to it, though it did not make the sting of loneliness any less real. Elena found comfort in small things: the sound of the river running just past the edge of town, the songs of the birds in the morning, and the gentle rhythm of her hands working through the day. She loved her life in its simplicity, even if it was tinged with a quiet sorrow. And sometimes, when the evenings were calm and the sky blushed pink with sunset, she would stand by her window and imagine a life where she was not so alone. She would picture someone walking up the garden path, tipping his hat and smiling in a way that made her heart lift, someone who would stay not out of duty, but out of choice. Those thoughts would linger as she prepared dinner or patched clothes, but reality would always creep back in, leaving her with the weight of her solitude. Despite her loneliness, Elena had a spirit that refused to break. She had learned resilience from necessity. She learned to cook with whatever was available, to make old clothes last longer, and to find joy in small moments that others might overlook. The neighbors often complimented her kindness, though none of them knew the quiet depth of her longing. Her siblings adored her, relying on her not just for care, but for guidance. She had become a steady rock in their lives, and they admired her without fully understanding the dream she held deep inside. The town itself was small and quiet, a cluster of wooden buildings and dirt roads, surrounded by endless fields. Most of the people had lived there for generations, and life moved slowly, almost predictably. There were celebrations, of course, harvest festivals, town dances, and small gatherings, but Elena rarely felt part of these events. She would attend when necessary, offering help or serving food, but she never lingered. Watching others pair off, laughing and dancing with someone special, only reminded her of what she had never known. Sometimes she felt a twinge of jealousy, but it was always tempered by a quiet resolve to make the life she could create, even if it was just for her and her siblings. One morning, as Elena walked to the market with a basket of fresh vegetables, she noticed a stranger riding into town. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a worn hat and boots that had clearly traveled many miles. His horse was tired but steady, and the man seemed equally worn, as if the world had left its mark on him. The townspeople whispered among themselves, curious about the newcomer. Elena, carrying her basket carefully, watched him from a distance. Something about him was different. There was a quiet sadness in the way he held himself, a kind of careful watchfulness that made him seem both strong and fragile at the same time. She returned to her errands, but her mind kept drifting back to the man. Who was he? Where had he come from? And why did it feel as though the whole town's air had changed when he rode past? That evening, Elena found herself lingering in the garden, her hands busy with weeding, but her thoughts far away. The wind brushed her hair against her face, carrying the scent of fresh soil and distant rain. She imagined him approaching, tipping his hat with a shy smile, and for a fleeting moment, her heart felt something it had not in years, a glimmer of hope. The next days passed slowly. Elena continued her routine, tending to her siblings, helping neighbors, and caring for her home. Yet she noticed the stranger more and more. He appeared at the market regularly, asking questions politely and purchasing only what he needed. Sometimes he would offer a kind word or a smile, brief but genuine. Elena found herself looking forward to these small exchanges, though she kept her feelings guarded. She was cautious, knowing that life had taught her to expect little from strangers. One morning she was organizing the shelves of her small store when he appeared again, his horse tied outside, his eyes scanning the rows of produce. He paused at her counter, and she offered him a polite nod. "Good morning," he said, his voice calm but carrying a warmth that surprised her. "Good morning," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm Jacob," he introduced himself. "I'm new around here." "Elena," she said simply. The exchange was brief, but something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of quiet loneliness in each other. Days turned into weeks, and Jacob became a familiar presence. He helped where he could, offering to carry heavy baskets or assist with chores in town. Elena found herself laughing at his dry humor, a sound she had almost forgotten she could produce. She began to see that perhaps, just perhaps, life had a way of introducing hope when it was least expected. Evenings became a time for reflection. After the work of the day, Elena would sit by the window, thinking about the man who had slowly begun to occupy her thoughts. She wondered about his past, his journey, and the sorrows he carried. She felt a connection, fragile yet undeniable, that grew stronger with each shared glance, each quiet conversation. For the first time in a long time, the ache of solitude was softened by the possibility that someone could truly see her, not just the caretaker, not just the helpful neighbor, but Elena, the woman who had long believed she would always be alone. Yet, even as hope began to bloom, Elena was careful. She did not allow herself to dream too boldly. Life had taught her that dreams could be fragile, easily broken by circumstance or misfortune. Still, she could not deny the small, persistent feeling in her chest, the sense that perhaps her life was about to change in ways she had never imagined. And so she continued, tending to her garden, caring for her siblings, and moving through each day with quiet strength, all while a new chapter lingered on the horizon, waiting to be written. Elena had started noticing Jacob more and more. At first it was small things, the way he helped an old neighbor carry firewood, or how he would politely wait his turn at the market without complaining. But as days passed, she realized there was something deeper about him. He wasn't just passing through. He carried a quiet sadness, a kind of loneliness that seemed to mirror her own. One afternoon, she was arranging fresh vegetables in the market when she saw him again. His hat was tipped low, shading his eyes, but she caught the faintest smile as he glanced at her. He carried a small bundle of supplies and nodded politely as he approached the counter. "Good afternoon, Elena," he said, his voice calm and soft. "Do you have any fresh apples today?" "Yes," she replied, pointing to a basket near the window.
These just came this morning. They're sweet.
He picked one up carefully, turning it over in his hands before placing it gently in his bag. I trust your word. Sweet is always better. Elena laughed lightly, a sound that seemed to surprise even herself. She had grown so used to quiet days that any small moment of joy felt extraordinary. Jacob noticed the laugh and smiled, but it was a quiet smile, one that seemed to hold more than just amusement. There was a depth in him that made her curious, and she felt a strange sense of safety in his presence. Over the next few weeks, Jacob became a familiar face in her life. He appeared in town almost daily, always helping where he could. Sometimes it was simple things like repairing a fence or helping a neighbor with chores. Other times it was his quiet presence that made a difference, the way he seemed to notice things that others overlooked. Elena found herself looking forward to these moments, though she did not dare to admit it, even to herself. One day, as Elena tended to her small garden behind the house, she heard the soft clip-clop of hooves. She looked up to see Jacob leading his horse slowly along the path. He stopped at the edge of her garden, tipping his hat in greeting. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" he said. Eleanor wiped her hands on her apron and nodded. "It is. The wind feels good today." He smiled, a warm expression that made her chest tighten in a way she hadn't felt in years. "I was hoping you wouldn't mind some company for a little while," he said. "Of course not," she replied, gesturing to a small bench near the garden. "Sit down. The sun is nice there." Jacob sat, and for a while they watched the wind move through the tall grass. No words were needed. The quiet between them was comfortable, almost soothing. Elena found herself relaxing in a way that had been rare for years. There was a feeling of trust, a sense that this stranger might understand her better than most of the people she had known her whole life. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft. "Do you travel a lot?" Jacob nodded slowly. "Yes. I've been moving from place to place for a long time now. I guess I've been looking for somewhere I could call home." Elena felt a pang of empathy. She understood what it meant to search for something that seemed just out of reach. "Sometimes," she said quietly, "it feels like the world moves on and you're left behind." He looked at her, his eyes reflecting a quiet understanding. "I know that feeling," he said simply. From that day on, their interactions grew naturally. Jacob would help her carry water from the well or offer to repair a broken fence post. Elena found herself talking to him about small things she had never shared with anyone else. Memories of her parents, funny stories about her siblings, even her fears about the future. Jacob listened patiently, never interrupting, never judging. There was a gentleness in him that made it easy to open up. One evening, as the sky turned a soft shade of orange and pink, Jacob asked if he could help with the garden. Elena hesitated, then agreed, handing him a small hoe. They worked side by side, digging the soil, planting seeds, and occasionally laughing at the clumsiness of their efforts. It was a simple activity, yet the shared labor created a sense of closeness neither had expected. Elena felt a flutter of something new in her chest, a feeling she had long believed she would never experience. As the days passed, Elena began to notice the small ways Jacob made life easier for her. He would bring supplies without being asked, offer advice when she needed it, and sometimes he would simply sit quietly while she worked, giving her the comfort of his presence. It was a slow, gentle friendship, one that grew stronger with each passing day. Yet, even with their growing connection, Elena remained cautious. She had spent so many years protecting her heart that it was difficult to believe that someone could truly care for her. She reminded herself to stay grounded, to enjoy the moments without expecting too much. Still, Every time Jacob smiled at her, every time he helped without asking for anything in return, a tiny spark of hope flickered in her heart. Jacob, too, found himself affected by Elena in ways he had not anticipated. He had lived a life of solitude, moving from town to town, never staying long enough to form deep connections. Yet Elena's quiet strength, her kindness, and her gentle laughter began to make him wonder if perhaps he had finally found a place to belong. He admired her independence and resilience, and he felt a growing desire to protect her, to be someone she could rely on. One afternoon, a small problem arose in the town. A young boy had wandered too far into the fields, and his parents were frantic. Without hesitation, Jacob offered to help, and Elena insisted on accompanying him. Together they found the boy near the edge of the river, unharmed but scared. The relief on the parents' faces was evident, and Elena noticed how naturally Jacob took charge, guiding the boy back safely. She felt a mix of admiration and gratitude, and for the first time she realized that she was beginning to see him as more than just a helpful stranger. That evening, as they walked back to town, Jacob spoke softly. "I'm glad you came with me," he said. "It would have been much harder alone." Elena smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. "I'm glad, too. I don't like seeing anyone in trouble, especially children." There was a pause, a quiet moment where neither spoke, yet both felt the significance of their growing bond. Elena realized that her heart was opening in ways she had not allowed for many years. She began to dream of a life where she was not always alone, a life where someone might stand beside her, share her burdens, and understand her in a way no one else could. The townspeople began to notice their companionship. Small whispers floated through the market and streets, though nothing was said directly to either of them. Elena, however, paid little attention to the gossip. She focused on the quiet moments, the smiles, and the small gestures that meant more than words ever could. As the days turned into weeks, their friendship deepened. Jacob learned about Elena's life, her responsibilities, and the love she had for her family. Elena learned about his past, the loneliness he had carried, and the longing he felt for a place to belong. They shared meals together, laughed at stories from each other's childhoods, and found comfort in the simplicity of being together. Yet, beneath the growing connection, there was a subtle tension. Both were cautious with their feelings. Elena worried about hoping too much, fearing disappointment. Jacob feared attachment, wary of the pain of loss that had marked his past. Despite these fears, the bond between them continued to grow, built on shared experiences, trust, and quiet understanding. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, Jacob helped Elena gather water from the well. They worked side by side, their hands occasionally brushing, sending unexpected warmth through Elena's body. She felt a nervous excitement, a flutter she had not experienced in years. For a brief moment she allowed herself to imagine what life might be like with him by her side, sharing the quiet moments of daily life. Jacob, too, felt a shift within himself. He realized that Elena had become more than a companion. She had become a presence he could not ignore. A woman whose strength and kindness drew him closer despite the walls he had built around his heart. He began to wonder if staying in this town, helping her, and being near her might be exactly what he had been searching for all along. As evening fell, they paused to watch the sky, the colors fading into deep blues and purples. The wind whispered through the tall grass, carrying the soft scent of flowers and earth. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath, as if acknowledging the quiet connection forming between them. Elena felt a mixture of hope and fear, not knowing what the future might bring, yet unable to deny the feelings growing within her heart. It was during these quiet shared moments that the foundation of something meaningful began to take root. A bond formed not through grand gestures or dramatic events, but through the simple acts of kindness, the shared silences, and the steady presence of someone who saw her, truly saw her, for the first time. And as the stars began to appear in the night sky, Elena realized that life, which had once felt lonely and predictable, was slowly beginning to change. A new chapter had begun, one filled with the possibility of companionship, understanding, and perhaps a love she had long thought would never come. Life had begun to feel different for Elena. For the first time in many years, she looked forward to each day with a quiet anticipation. Jacob had become a regular presence in her life, helping with chores, sharing small conversations, and offering a sense of comfort she had never known. Yet, even as their bond grew, both of them carried invisible walls, built carefully over years of loneliness and past disappointments. Elena noticed subtle changes in herself. She laughed more easily, lingered longer when talking to neighbors, and even allowed herself to dream quietly of a life that included someone by her side. But fear and caution were never far behind. She reminded herself that no one had ever asked her to marry, that no one had ever truly seen her as more than the responsible young woman who took care of her family. Her heart, though beginning to stir with hope, still carried a cautious wariness. Jacob, too, wrestled with his feelings. He had lived a life marked by solitude and loss, and though he felt a growing closeness to Elena, he feared what attachment could bring. He was aware of her strength, her independence, and the deep responsibilities she carried. He worried that stepping closer might disrupt the delicate balance she had built in her life. And yet the thought of being near her, of sharing her days and offering support, filled him with a sense of purpose he had never known. One morning, a problem arose that tested both of them. A neighboring ranch had been having disputes over water rights with several families, including Elena's. The issue threatened the small irrigation system that sustained Elena's family garden, and without it, her siblings' meals and the modest income from selling vegetables in town could be severely affected. Elena felt a mix of frustration and fear. She had handled many challenges before, but this one was different. It involved neighbors and formal agreements, and it seemed far beyond what she could solve alone. She stood at the edge of her garden, looking at the dry soil where water had once flowed freely, and felt a pang of worry. How could she protect what little she had built? How could she ensure her family would continue to have food, a home, and safety? Her heart was heavy, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a sharp edge of helplessness creeping in. Jacob appeared at that moment, his boots crunching softly against the dirt path. He had heard of the dispute through town gossip, and without waiting for an invitation, he offered his help. "Elena, we'll figure this out together," he said quietly. "I won't let you handle it alone." Elena hesitated, unsure if she should let someone else into such a personal problem. She had managed so much on her own. Accepting help felt strange, almost like admitting weakness. But when she looked at Jacob, she saw the sincerity in his eyes. He wasn't offering to take control or to dominate the situation. He was offering support, companionship, and understanding. With a slow nod, she agreed, feeling a small spark of relief. Over the next several days, they visited the neighboring ranches, spoke with families, and worked through the tangled disagreements. Jacob's presence made the work easier. He had a calm, steady approach, and his confidence helped Elena navigate conversations she would have found difficult alone. At times, Elena felt the frustration rise within her. Neighbors unwilling to compromise, water levels dropping, tempers flaring. But Jacob's quiet steadiness reminded her to stay calm and patient. Despite their efforts, not everything went smoothly. One afternoon, a particularly stubborn neighbor argued aggressively, blaming Elena's family for taking more than their share of water. Elena felt her temper rise. She had faced many difficulties in her life, but she had never encountered someone so unwilling to listen. She took a deep breath, trying to maintain control, and Jacob gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "We'll handle this," he said softly, "together." That small gesture of support was enough to calm her nerves, and together they negotiated a compromise that satisfied both sides. It wasn't perfect, but it was a solution, and for Elena, it was a victory. She realized that she had come to rely on Jacob's presence not only for practical help, but for emotional support as well. He had become more than a friend. He was a partner in facing life's challenges, someone she could trust to stand by her even when circumstances were difficult. Yet the stress of the dispute also revealed vulnerabilities in their relationship. In quiet moments when the town was empty and the work was done, Elena found herself reflecting on Jacob's hesitations, the small walls he maintained around his heart. She sensed that he was holding back, afraid of commitment or perhaps afraid of getting too close. She too wrestled with her fears. Could she allow herself to hope for more? Could she trust someone with her heart after so many years of solitude? One evening, after a particularly long day of negotiations and repairs, they walked together toward the edge of the prairie. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange, pink, and purple. The quiet of the open land surrounded them, and for a moment, neither spoke. They simply walked side by side, letting the wind carry their unspoken thoughts. Finally, Elena broke the silence.
"Jacob," she said softly, "why do you stay here? You could leave any time."
You've traveled so much. Why stay with all these problems? Jacob looked at her, his expression serious but gentle.
"Because I see you," he said. "I see what you do every day, the way you care for your family, the way you never give up. I can't just walk away when I see someone like you." Elena felt a mixture of surprise and warmth. His words were simple, yet they carried a weight that resonated deep within her. For the first time, she realized that someone truly saw her, not just the surface, not just the responsible caretaker, but Elena, the woman who had quietly carried so much for so long. Even as this understanding grew, challenges continued. The town itself was small, and gossip traveled quickly. Some neighbors began to comment on their companionship, and Elena felt a mix of embarrassment and discomfort. She wanted to protect the fragile connection she and Jacob had built, and the attention made her uneasy. Jacob, too, noticed the subtle glances and whispers but remained calm, showing patience and understanding. He never pressured her, never demanded more than she was ready to give. Despite these external pressures, their bond strengthened. They shared quiet meals, repaired fences together, and even found moments to simply sit and watch the prairie stretch endlessly before them. These small acts, repeated over days and weeks, created a sense of closeness that neither had expected. Elena found herself laughing more easily, trusting more openly, and beginning to imagine a life where she was not always alone. But the emotional challenge was real. Both knew that their connection carried risk. Elena worried about letting her heart hope too much, fearing disappointment if Jacob were to leave. Jacob feared attachment, haunted by memories of past losses and the uncertainty of what the future might hold. These fears created an invisible tension between them, subtle but persistent, that neither could ignore. One afternoon, the water dispute escalated. Heavy rains had damaged part of the irrigation system, and the task of repairing it required immediate action. Elena and Jacob worked tirelessly, lifting beams, clearing debris, and directing water flow to prevent further damage. Exhausted by the physical labor and emotional stress, they finally paused to catch their breath. Elena's hands were blistered, her clothes dirty, but she felt a sense of determination she hadn't felt before. Jacob, equally tired, looked at her with admiration. "You're incredible," he said quietly. "I've never seen someone handle so much and still stay so strong." Elena smiled, a mixture of pride and fatigue. "I don't have a choice," she replied, "but having someone by my side makes it a little easier." Those words, simple as they were, marked a turning point. Both realized that their connection had moved beyond friendship. They were partners, not just in work, but in facing life's uncertainties. And yet, the unspoken fears lingered, reminding them that the road ahead would not be without challenges. As night fell, they walked back to the small house, the sky dotted with stars. The prairie was calm, the air cool, and the distant sounds of animals filled the night. Elena felt a mixture of hope and apprehension, understanding that while her heart was beginning to open, trust and patience would still be necessary. Jacob felt the same, realizing that the feelings growing between them were powerful but fragile, requiring care and understanding. In the quiet of that evening, both reflected on the journey so far. They had faced challenges together, relied on one another, and begun to understand the strength and resilience that each carried. The conflict over water and land had tested their patience, their courage, and their ability to trust. And through it all, they had discovered something rare, a connection built not on grand gestures, but on shared effort, mutual respect, and quiet understanding. Though the challenges were not yet fully resolved, and though their hearts were still cautious, Elena and Jacob had taken an important step. They had begun to face life's difficulties together, discovering the comfort of having someone to rely on, the quiet joy of shared labor, and the subtle growing warmth of mutual care. And in the soft glow of the prairie night, they both knew that this bond, fragile yet powerful, was only the beginning of something far greater than either had imagined. The days following the resolution of the water dispute should have been easier for Elena, but life had a way of testing even the strongest hearts. The small town, though quiet and familiar, held challenges that were not always visible. A new threat had appeared. A wealthy rancher from outside the town had set his sights on acquiring nearby land, including the small plot that Elena's family had cared for over generations. Rumors began to spread, whispers of legal actions, and plans that could force families off their land. Elena felt a tightening in her chest. It was as if the weight of her family's life rested solely on her shoulders once again. Jacob noticed her anxiety immediately. They were walking through the garden one afternoon, tending to young plants that had just sprouted, when he saw her pause, staring at the horizon with distant eyes. "Elena," he said softly, touching her arm. "What's wrong?" She shook her head, forcing a small smile. "I'm just worried," she admitted, "about the land, about keeping everything safe for my siblings. It's a lot to handle." Jacob's eyes softened. "You don't have to handle it alone," he said firmly. "We'll face this together, just like before." Elena wanted to believe him, wanted to feel that same calm strength she had felt during the water dispute. But this was different. This threat felt larger, more permanent, and beyond her control. She had managed her family's life for years, but the thought of losing it all was terrifying. The following days were a whirlwind of action. Elena and Jacob went to the town office to review old property deeds, spoke with local officials, and even sought advice from experienced ranchers who understood the legalities of land ownership. Every step was exhausting, both physically and emotionally. Yet, amidst the worry, Jacob's presence was a constant comfort. He worked tirelessly beside her, organizing papers, negotiating with officials, and offering steady encouragement when the frustration became too much to bear. Late one afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of gold and red, a confrontation occurred. The wealthy rancher, accompanied by two men, arrived at Elena's family land, claiming ownership and demanding that she vacate the property immediately. Elena's heart raced, and her hands trembled slightly as she met their stern gazes. The threat was real, immediate, and frightening. Jacob stepped forward, his tall figure shielding her as he addressed the men. "This land belongs to the family who has cared for it for generations," he said firmly. "They have every right to be here, and they will not leave without a proper resolution." Elena felt a rush of gratitude and relief. His courage emboldened her, reminding her that she was not alone. Together they stood their ground, refusing to be intimidated. The rancher sneered, underestimating the determination and quiet strength of the pair before him. Over the next several days, tension hung heavy over the town. Legal documents were reviewed, negotiations became tense, and the future of Elena's home seemed uncertain. It was exhausting, and yet, amidst the turmoil, the connection between Elena and Jacob deepened. They relied on each other in ways that went beyond practical help. Jacob became her anchor, a source of calm and courage in a storm of uncertainty. Elena, in turn, reminded him of the value of persistence, compassion, and hope. During this time, they found moments of quiet intimacy. Early in the mornings, before the heat of the day, they would walk along the edge of the prairie, sharing stories from their pasts. Jacob spoke of the towns he had traveled through, the loneliness he had carried, and the longing he felt for a place to belong. Elena shared memories of her parents, the joys and struggles of raising her siblings, and the dreams she had quietly held for a life that included love and companionship. One evening, after an especially long day of negotiations, they returned to the garden, weary and silent. Jacob broke the silence first, his voice low and steady. "Elena," he began, "I've traveled a long time, searching for something I couldn't name. I think I found it here, with you." Elena's heart fluttered, a warmth spreading through her chest. She looked at him, searching his eyes for honesty, and found it reflected there. The moment was fragile yet powerful, a quiet confession in the midst of chaos. "I feel the same," she whispered. "I've never felt so understood, so seen." For a long moment, they simply stood together, the prairie stretching endlessly around them. No words were needed beyond the unspoken understanding in their eyes. It was a turning point, a recognition that their bond had grown beyond friendship and into something deeper, something rare and precious. The next morning brought both hope and challenge. The local council had scheduled a hearing to resolve the land dispute once and for all. Elena and Jacob prepared carefully, gathering documents, witnesses, and support from neighbors who understood the importance of preserving the land. Anxiety mixed with determination as the day approached, and Elena realized that her heart would not only be invested in the outcome, but also in the man standing beside her. The hearing itself was tense. The wealthy rancher presented his case, speaking with authority and confidence, while Elena and Jacob presented theirs, grounded in years of evidence, history, and community support. The room was filled with quiet tension, the kind that pressed heavily on the chest, making each moment feel longer than it was. As the discussion continued, Elena felt her courage waver. The words, the arguments, the legalities, it was overwhelming. Jacob noticed her unease and gently took her hand. "We're in this together," he whispered. "No matter what happens, I'm with you." That simple reassurance was enough to steady her. Together they presented their side clearly, passionately, and with undeniable sincerity. Their dedication, the love and care they had invested in the land, and the quiet strength they displayed spoke volumes, not just to the council but to everyone present. Hours passed, and finally, the council reached a decision. The land would remain in Elena's family, protected by law and by the acknowledgement of its long history. Relief flooded over her, and tears filled her eyes. She had fought for her home, for her family, and, with Jacob by her side, she had prevailed. In the quiet aftermath, as the council room emptied and the sun began to set, Jacob turned to her, a gentle smile on his face. "We did it," he said simply. Elena nodded, her voice trembling with emotion. "We did," she replied. She looked at him, realizing that the victory was not just about the land, but about something deeper. The realization that they could face challenges together, that their bond had become unshakable. The following evening, under the soft glow of twilight, they returned to the prairie. The wind whispered through the tall grass, carrying the faint scent of flowers and earth. They walked hand in hand, feeling the weight of the past days lift slowly, replaced by a quiet, shared joy. Jacob stopped and turned to her, his expression serious, yet tender.
"Elena," he said, "I don't want to just be here for the hard times. I want to be here for everything."
"I want to share my life with you, if you'll let me." Elena's breath caught in her throat. The words she had longed to hear, yet had never dared to hope for, were finally spoken. Her eyes glistened as she smiled, feeling a warmth that seemed to fill every part of her. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I want that too." In that moment, the world seemed to pause. The prairie stretched endlessly around them, the sky painted in brilliant shades of orange and purple. They stood together, two hearts finding each other after years of solitude, fear, and longing. The challenges they had faced, the struggles they had endured, had led them to this point, a quiet triumph of love, trust, and understanding. For the first time in her life, Elena felt completely seen and chosen. The ache of loneliness that had shadowed her for so many years began to fade, replaced by a sense of hope and belonging. Jacob, too, felt a relief he had not known in years, a certainty that he had finally found a place, a person, and a life worth staying for. As night fell and the first stars appeared, they sat together on a small hill overlooking the fields, talking quietly and sharing their dreams. They spoke of the future, of simple joys and daily routines, of hopes that had been long held in their hearts. And in those gentle conversations, they discovered that love was not just about grand gestures or dramatic moments. It was about presence, patience, trust, and the quiet courage to face life together. The challenges were not entirely behind them. Life would continue to test them, and new difficulties would arise. But in that moment, Elena and Jacob had discovered a truth that would carry them through anything, that together they were stronger, braver, and more complete than they had ever been apart. And as they watched the stars shimmer above the prairie, hand in hand, both understood that this was only the beginning of a journey filled with love, resilience, and hope. The hard days had led them here, and now, side by side, they were ready to face whatever came next, knowing that their high life after the land dispute slowly began to settle into a gentle rhythm. The tension that had weighed so heavily on Elena's shoulders lifted, replaced by a quiet, steady sense of relief. For the first time in many years, she could breathe without the constant fear of losing everything she had worked for. Her family's home and garden were safe, and she could finally focus on enjoying life instead of merely surviving it. Yet, what made this period truly remarkable was not just the security of their land, but the new presence in her life, the man who had stood by her side through it all. Jacob stayed in town, no longer a passing stranger or traveler. He became a part of the daily rhythm, rising early to help with chores, repairing fences, tending animals, and working alongside Elena in the garden. His presence was natural, comfortable, and yet it brought an excitement to her days she had not known for years. It was the small things. The way he would hand her a basket of vegetables without being asked, the way he would help her siblings with their lessons, or the gentle way he would brush dirt from her sleeves, that reminded her, quietly but clearly, that he was not just a friend or helper. He was someone who cared deeply, someone who had chosen to stay. Elena found herself laughing more easily, smiling at strangers, and even imagining a future she had never allowed herself to consider. Terrapata Prairie, once a symbol of her loneliness, now felt like a vast place of possibility, a home for shared dreams and quiet joys. She walked through the fields each morning with a sense of gratitude, feeling the wind on her face and the warmth of Jacob's hand occasionally brushing against hers. Life felt lighter, fuller, and more vibrant than it had in years. Jacob, too, felt the change deeply. He had spent most of his life moving from town to town, never staying long enough to form lasting connections. But Elena had changed that. With her, he discovered that belonging was not about the place, but the people with whom you shared your days. She had shown him that love could be quiet, patient, and steady, built on trust and understanding rather than grand gestures alone. And now, as they worked and laughed and lived side by side, he realized that this was the home he had been searching for all along. The townspeople, who had once only known Elena as the quiet caretaker, began to notice the subtle shift in her life. They saw her smile more, observed her calm confidence, and watched as Jacob helped with work around the town without ever demanding recognition. Slowly, respect and admiration replaced whispers. People began to understand the strength of the bond that had formed between them, a partnership built on mutual support and genuine care. One morning, Elena woke early, as she always did, to tend to the garden. The dew clung to the grass, the sun was just beginning to rise, and the sky was painted in soft shades of pink and gold. Jacob joined her, carrying a basket of tools and smiling as he approached. "Morning," he said. "I thought we could start with the tomato plants today." Elena nodded, feeling a warmth in her chest that had become familiar in recent months. "Good idea," she replied. "They need attention before the sun gets too strong." They worked together in companionable silence, their hands brushing occasionally, exchanging small words of encouragement, laughter, and shared observations about the growth of the plants. The rhythm of work became a rhythm of connection, each act reinforcing the bond they had built through trust, effort, and shared responsibility. After finishing, they sat on the porch steps, watching their younger siblings play in the yard. Elena leaned against Jacob, feeling the steady weight of his presence and the comfort it brought. "I never imagined life could feel like this," she said softly. "Peaceful, safe, full of hope." Jacob squeezed her hand gently. "Neither did I," he admitted. "But it's amazing what we can create when we face challenges together. And now we can focus on building something beautiful, not just surviving." Over the following weeks, Elena and Jacob began to plan small steps toward a shared future. They talked about expanding the garden, improving the house, and even simple pleasures like cooking together or taking walks along the prairie in the evenings. Each conversation, each plan, was a quiet promise, a reflection of the love and trust that had grown between them. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant shades over the horizon, Jacob led Elena to a small hill overlooking the fields. The sky was painted in deep orange, purple, and gold, and the wind carried the soft scent of wildflowers. He turned to her, taking her hands in his, and spoke with gentle sincerity. "Elena," he began, These past months have shown me what life can be like when you find someone worth staying for. You've taught me patience, courage, and hope. And I want to spend the rest of my life with you, if you'll have me." Tears welled in Elena's eyes, and her voice trembled as she replied, "I thought I would never hear those words. I want that too. I want to share my life with you, Jacob." They embraced, feeling the warmth and comfort of a bond that had been tested and proven strong. The prairie stretched endlessly around them, a quiet witness to their union, and for the first time in years, both felt a complete sense of belonging. Life settled into a new rhythm after that evening. Their days were filled with shared work, quiet companionship, and small celebrations of life's simple joys. They celebrated harvests together, helped neighbors with kindness, and nurtured their family and home with care. Every act, no matter how small, reinforced the partnership they had built, a relationship grounded in respect, trust, and love. Elena's siblings flourished as well, benefiting from the stability and warmth of a household strengthened by Jacob's presence. The children laughed more freely, felt secure in their home, and learned from the example of two adults who faced life's challenges with courage and compassion. Elena felt a deep satisfaction in seeing her family thrive, knowing that together they had built not just a home, but a life full of meaning. The townspeople, who had once been indifferent, now admired the harmony and resilience of Elena and Jacob's household. Children played safely in the streets, neighbors offered support without expectation, and the community grew closer, inspired by the example of two people who had faced hardships and emerged stronger together. As the seasons changed, Elena and Jacob found joy in the rhythm of nature and life. Spring brought new growth in the garden and longer days filled with laughter. Summer offered warm evenings where they walked hand in hand through the prairie, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Autumn painted the fields in brilliant golds and reds, a reminder of the cycle of life and the beauty of change. Even winter, though harsh and cold, became a season of warmth indoors, spent by the fire, sharing stories, and nurturing the bond they had cultivated. One quiet evening, Elena reflected on how much had changed in her life. She remembered the years of solitude, the longing she had felt, and the quiet ache in her heart that had once seemed permanent. Now she looked around at her family, at Jacob, at the home they had preserved and nurtured, and she felt a sense of gratitude that went deeper than words could express. Life had brought challenges, yes, but it had also brought love, companionship, and a sense of belonging she had never imagined possible. Jacob, too, reflected on the journey. He thought of the years he had spent moving from place to place, carrying a quiet loneliness, and how Elena had changed everything. With her, he had discovered that love could be gentle, steadfast, and enduring. He had found a home not just in a place, but in a person, and he understood now that life's true richness came from shared hearts and shared efforts. Together, they planned a future filled with hope. They spoke of small joys, building a new barn, planting more trees, celebrating birthdays and harvests. They dreamed quietly of travels they might take, but more importantly, they cherished the life they had built together, knowing that the greatest adventure was the one they shared every day. In the evenings, they often sat on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the hills, the sky painted in colors that never seemed to repeat. They held hands, spoke softly, and sometimes simply sat in silence, content with the knowledge that they had found something rare and beautiful. Love, they realized, was not only in grand declarations or dramatic moments, but in everyday choices, in patience, care, and unwavering presence. And so, life continued, steady and full. Elena's heart, once heavy with longing, now carried joy and trust. Jacob's heart, once burdened by loneliness, now held warmth and certainty. Together, they faced the future with courage, knowing that whatever challenges might come, they would face them side by side. The prairie stretched endlessly, a constant reminder of freedom, hope, and resilience. The wind whispered through the tall grass, carrying with it the stories of the past and the promise of the future. Elena and Jacob walked together along its paths, hand in hand, hearts intertwined, and lives forever changed. Their story, born from solitude and struggle, had blossomed into a life full of love, trust, and companionship. The woman who had whispered, "No one ever asked me to marry," had found her place in the heart of a man who had wandered for years, lonely and searching. Together, they had created a home, nurtured a family, and discovered the quiet, enduring power of love. And as the stars began to shimmer in the night sky, Elena and Jacob knew, without doubt, that they had found what so many search for their entire lives: a home, not just in a place, but in each other's hearts. The days after the land dispute finally began to settle, and for the first time in years, Elena felt a sense of calm wash over her life. The heavy weight that had pressed on her shoulders, the fear of losing her home, her garden, and everything she had worked for, had lifted. Her family's land was safe, their home secure, and the threat that had once felt so insurmountable had passed. Yet what brought Elena the most peace was not the resolution of the dispute itself, but the constant presence of Jacob beside her. Jacob had stayed in town after the resolution, no longer a stranger passing through, but a part of Elena's daily life. Every morning he rose early to help her with chores, whether it was tending the garden, repairing fences, or fetching water. He worked quietly, never seeking recognition, but always offering support and encouragement. His presence had become a source of comfort for Elena, a steady hand when life felt uncertain, a gentle smile in moments of frustration, and a companion who never left her side. Elena found herself smiling more, laughing more freely, and feeling a lightness in her heart she had never known. The prairie, which had once seemed empty and vast, now felt alive, full of possibilities. She walked through the fields each morning with a sense of gratitude, noticing the small joys of life, the way the wind bent the grass, the songs of birds in the distance, and the sun glinting off the river. Jacob walked beside her, often in silence, sometimes sharing small thoughts or observations, but always creating a quiet, shared rhythm that made her days feel warmer and more meaningful. Jacob, too, felt a change within himself. His life had been one of constant movement, drifting from place to place, never staying long enough to form lasting connections. But with Elena, he had discovered something he had longed for without knowing it: a sense of belonging. She had shown him that love was not just excitement or passion, but patience, trust, and the quiet work of building a life together. He felt grounded, complete, and for the first time, he truly felt at home. The townspeople began to notice the changes, too. Elena, once quiet and reserved, now held herself with quiet confidence. Jacob's steady support made him respected, not just as a man of strength, but as someone trustworthy and kind. Neighbors observed the partnership forming between them, their shared efforts and mutual respect. Slowly, admiration replaced gossip, and the small town began to understand the depth of the bond that had grown between the two. One morning, Elena and Jacob worked together in the garden, planting fresh vegetables for the upcoming season. The sun rose softly, casting golden light across the fields. Birds chirped in the distance, and the wind carried the faint scent of wildflowers. Jacob handed Elena a basket filled with seedlings, his fingers brushing lightly against hers. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a quiet joy that she had not experienced for many years. You know, Jacob said, breaking the comfortable silence, I never imagined life could feel this complete. Elena smiled, her heart light. I feel the same, she said. I've spent so many years worrying, struggling, and trying to keep everything together. And now, it feels like I can breathe. They worked in companionable silence for hours, exchanging small smiles, laughter, and quiet words of encouragement. The simple acts of planting, watering, and tending the garden had become a ritual, a reflection of their partnership. Each shared task, each gentle touch, strengthened the bond that had grown slowly but steadily over months of trials and shared experiences. As the evening approached, Jacob led Elena to a small hill overlooking the prairie. The sky glowed in shades of orange, pink, and purple, the kind of colors that seemed almost too beautiful to be real. They stood together side by side, the wind ruffling their hair, and the vast field stretching endlessly before them. Elena, Jacob said softly, taking both her hands in his, these past months have shown me what life can be when you have someone worth staying for. You've taught me patience, courage, and hope. I want to spend my life with you, if you'll let me. Tears filled Elena's eyes, and her voice trembled as she replied, I've dreamed of hearing those words for so long, and now I do.
Yes, Jacob.
I want to share my life with you. They embraced, holding each other tightly as the prairie around them seemed to stand still. In that moment, the past, the loneliness, the struggle, the long years of waiting faded away. What mattered was the present, the life they had built together, and the promise of a future filled with love and companionship. The next weeks were filled with planning and quiet joy. Elena and Jacob began imagining small steps toward a shared life, expanding the garden, improving the house, adding a new barn, and planting trees that would grow alongside them for years to come. Every discussion, every small plan, was an expression of their partnership, a reflection of their commitment to one another and to the home they had worked so hard to preserve. Their family life flourished. Elena's younger siblings thrived in the stability of a household strengthened by Jacob's presence. They laughed more freely, played without worry, and learned from the example of two adults who had faced life's challenges with courage and care. Elena watched them with quiet pride, knowing that the future she had longed for, a life filled with love, stability, and hope, was becoming a reality. Even the small town around them seemed to change. Neighbors, inspired by the partnership between Elena and Jacob, offered help and support more freely. The community grew closer, connected by respect, admiration, and shared trust. The story of their perseverance, of standing firm in the face of challenges, became a quiet legend in the town, a reminder of what could be accomplished with courage, cooperation, and love. One crisp morning, Elena and Jacob walked along the edge of the prairie, the sun rising behind them and casting long, golden shadows. They paused to watch a pair of deer grazing in the distance. Elena leaned against Jacob, feeling the warmth of his presence and the comfort it brought. I never thought I'd see a life like this for myself, she said softly. A life full of peace, laughter, and someone who truly cares. Jacob smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. And I never thought I'd find a place to belong. But with you, I feel like I've finally come home. Their lives continued with this quiet joy. Spring brought vibrant growth in the garden. Summer offered long days of shared work and laughter. Autumn painted the fields with gold and red. And winter, though cold, became a season of warmth indoors. Firelight, stories, and shared dreams. Each season carried its own pleasures, each day a continuation of the life they were building together. Even ordinary moments became extraordinary. Cooking together in the kitchen, mending fences, walking through fields, or watching the stars at night. They discovered that love was not just in grand gestures, but in daily acts of care, in patience, trust, and shared effort. Their hearts, once weighed down by loneliness and fear, now carried hope, happiness, and a sense of belonging that grew stronger with each passing day. As the years passed, Elena and Jacob became a source of inspiration in the town. Their home remained a place of warmth and safety, their partnership a model of strength, love, and cooperation. The garden flourished, the land thrived, and their family grew closer than ever. They had faced hardship together, built trust, and nurtured a love that was steady, enduring, and true. Elena often reflected on the long journey that had brought her here, from the quiet girl who had whispered that no one had ever asked her to marry, to the woman standing hand in hand with a man who had chosen to stay by her side. She realized that love had come not in a sudden dramatic moment, but in small, consistent acts, in trust, patience, and shared courage. Jacob, too, recognized the transformation. He had wandered for years, searching for something he could not name. With Elena, he found not only love, but a home, a purpose, and a life worth sharing. Together, they had discovered that true happiness comes from facing challenges, supporting one another, and nurturing the bonds that matter most. And so, as the stars twinkled over the prairie and the wind whispered through the tall grass, Elena and Jacob walked hand in hand, their hearts intertwined, their lives forever changed. They had built a home, preserved a family, and discovered the quiet, enduring power of love. The woman who had once whispered, "No one ever asked me to marry," had finally found a place in a man's heart, and together they had created a life full of hope, joy, and belonging. The prairie, which had once symbolized loneliness and emptiness, now reflected the richness of their shared life. Every sunrise was a promise, every sunset a reminder of the day's joys. They had faced hardship, uncertainty, and fear, but in the end, they had found something rare and beautiful, a love that was patient, steady, and unshakable. And as they sat together on the porch one warm evening, watching the sky turn shades of gold and purple, Elena whispered softly, "I never thought life could be like this." Jacob smiled, squeezing her hand gently. "Neither did I. But now we know. Love, patience, and courage make even the hardest journey worthwhile." And with that, they watched the stars appear above, knowing that whatever challenges life might bring, they would face them together, side by side, hearts forever joined.